Identical twins of Reddit. What's the most embarrassing situation where you've been mistaken for your twin? My father spent a year abroad before returning to enroll in the same college as his twin brother. The first few days were pretty standard. Acquaintances of my uncle mistaking my dad for him. Business as usual. That was until one girl approached him, publicly mind you, and with a wink, said you were really great last night. I gave your number to a few friends. I hope you don't mind. Naturally my dad went from there to immediately seek out and congratulate his brother on his good fortune and hopefully share in the spoils. On the way he found himself receiving a disproportionate level of sly smiles and sidelong glances from some of the groups he passed. By the time he finally found my uncle, he was thoroughly perplexed. Surely his brother couldn't have been this lucky. They were good looking guys, but this was just ridiculous. My uncle flushed and faltered when confronted by my dad. He stammered and tiptoed around the issue before my dad finally got it out of him. How had he managed so prolific a penile pedigree? He hadn't. Turns out my uncle had spent all his money in the first few weeks and had turned to desperate measures for cash. He had been working as a stripper, doing mostly private parties, but naturally word got around. So for the rest of the year my father had to contend with the fact that a good number of the people on campus had effectively seen him naked. Not an identical twin, but I do have a twin sister. I'm a guy. We both have names that start with B. This was about 5 years ago. She had a few hot friends in high school and they would always come around the house and hang out. If I was there, I would always joke around with them or playfully flirt with them. Nothing crazy. However, one of her friends was always a little bit more flirtatious with me than any of the others. Never thought anything of it until I received a text from her one day out of the blue. Wanna chill tonight? I was so taken aback I really didn't know what to do. Did my sister know her friend had asked me to hang out? Should I tell my sister? I texted her friend back, still a bit surprised but curious. This is kind of unexpected. What would you wanna do? She answered, just need to get a few things off my chest. You going to be home at 7? I can just head over then. Me. Yeah, that's fine. I should be home. What brought this on so suddenly? You know. Just a lot of feelings and sheet me. Okay, well just text me when you're here equals. My heart is racing at this point and I decided I'd see how things went that night and talk to my sister later. So I'm waiting for her to get there and then all of a sudden I hear her downstairs. I head down the steps to go get her and she's talking to my dad. He walks back to the living room. I say hey and ask her how she is and all that and say we can head out back to talk. She asks if everything is alright. I, a little confused, then asked what made her want to hang out tonight and why she waited so long. She gets all red and opens her phone real quick and quickly realizes what happened. She texted me instead of my sister. TLDR. Tried to smash. Not so fast. Edit. The aftermath. Laughs were had. The friend knew how I used to get around. Always had a girlfriend or prospect. There was definitely some sexual tension after the event. I'm sure if I had pursued I could have smashed. I respect my sister too much to have put her through anything that could have happened. I went to college shortly after. Here's my mistaken identity story with respect to my identical twin brother. We both attended the same university a long time ago, but had two different majors, so our daily schedules stayed completely distinct. School routines commence, and I'm attending music classes on a regular basis. In due course I start chatting it up with a cute saxophone player. She and I are getting along swimmingly for a while, but in a short while I start noticing a palpable cooling off of her attitude. I shrug it off as someone giving me the back off, not interested message, and carry on with my other friends. Life goes on, so many fish in the sea, etc. Fast forward 4 years, it's graduation day. My brother and I are dressed identically in our cap and gowns for the ceremony. We are standing there side by side, while our proud parents are taking our picture. For adult twins, this is about as identical looking as you can get without coming across as creepy or lame. When all of a sudden I hear, oh my god, I thought you were the biggest snob. You talked to me in the band room, like we were best friends, and then ignored me in the science building, like you didn't want anything to do with me. Yes, it was that saxophone player. By this point, we are both in different relationships and school is over, so there's no real point to pursue anything. But it was certainly a good laugh, and makes for a good anecdote. TLDR. Accused of being a snob by a classmate, because they didn't realize I had an identical twin brother. My brother and I are now 25, but in middle school being a twin was funny/embarrassing. We are one of the sets of twins who look exactly alike, get the same haircut and even our voices sound the same. In 7th grade I was minding my own business in class when someone joked that I wasn't myself. Immediately everyone in the classroom and the teacher decided to investigate. Although I had all my papers with me and all my belongings, they came to the conclusion that we could have switched them. So these Harvard educated teachers did what they thought was best. They grabbed my brother from his classroom across the hall and started comparing us, trying to make sure we were who we said we were. After numerous times of us assuring them we were in the right class, I couldn't help but laugh some. After my laugh, people in the classrooms started to laugh and come out into the hallway with us. The teachers found this amusing, that nobody knew who we were, and now 50+ students are in the hallway trying to tell them who I was and was not. Needless to say, this ended with both of us in the assistant principal's office with a stern warning to not switch courses, even though we were in the right class. Thinking back, what a bunch of morons. Don't even get me started with girlfriends kissing and groping the wrong person in high school. Only positive was being popular by doing nothing but existing. Oh, there are a few, but one of the more memorable ones is when we were in high school. I was just walking through the halls between classes and this guy who I sort of knew rounds the corner and starts walking towards me. I give the classic lazy wave to acknowledge his presence, but then his face hardens and he flips me off and starts yelling at me how pissed off he is at me. Now, this guy was normally pretty jolly, and we barely spoke, so this took me super off guard. He basically continued a verbal assault until I was out of earshot. When I got home I told me brother what happened, and turns out they had a big argument in gym class earlier and the guy was still fuming and thought I was my brother. Another one is when I was staying at a hotel with some friends, my brother and his girlfriend. My brother was in the bathroom and it was dark and most people were asleep. I was brushing my teeth or something and sat on the bed my brother and his girlfriend were sharing. His girlfriend rises up and starts to hug me before realizing I wasn't my brother and recoiling. We laughed it off and still laugh about it today, but there was a moment of awkward. I have more, because being a twin is fun, so let me know if you want any more. Edit with more. We switched classes on more than one occasion, but only once did we get caught, and I still cringe thinking about it. Basically we had nothing important going on in most of our classes except for turning in an essay, so we gave each other our papers and decided to switch classes for a day. Turns out we had to write a reflection on the paper we were turning in, but we had each other's paper. My brother tries to play it cool and pretend to be me coming into his class and asking for it. Unfortunately high schoolers are idiots, and the moment he opens the door a kid yells in front of the teacher, "Did you get caught?" I looked at the previously unassuming teacher, and she had clearly figured it out. She gave me an absolute death glare, then motioned silently for us to swap papers. I switched with him, and she didn't say anything, just shook her head disappointingly, and continued with class. Torture. I'm an identical twin, and my first husband was also a twin. You'd think I'd have tons of stories, but I really only have two. Warning, the first one is pretty stupid. When he and I were dating in college, we loved to dress identically, like matching plaid shirts and stuff. Because people would ask us all sarcastic, "What are you guys, twins?" And we'd just laugh to pieces at them. Because we were. Just not to each other. I told you, that one's stupid. The next one is actually pretty embarrassing. When we were planning to get married, our pastor, who was going to officiate at our wedding, asked us to tell her the story of how we'd met. So we told her. It was our first day in college, and my roommate and I had assigned seats next to each other in assembly. We were sitting there admiring all the boys around us and making comments, like you do. She pointed out a guy down at the front, and I remarked that I recognized him because I'd seen his twin around campus, and his twin was actually a lot hotter. A few seconds later, some guy plops down in the seat next to me, and it was a hot twin, my future husband. That's how we met, and that's the story we told our pastor. We never in a million years dreamed she'd be so tactless as to retell that story in her opening remarks at our wedding. Yes, with my husband's twin brother, the unhot twin, standing not 5 feet away as best man, and his wife in the front row of the church. They were both deeply humiliated and would barely speak to us afterward. I'm not a twin myself, but I'm friends with twins, so I know these 2 twin guys, and one of them happens to be gay and is going out with someone. He neglected to tell his brother either of these facts, as well as never told his boyfriend he was a twin as well. Anyway, one day, the straight twin and I are walking through the mall and this guy comes up to my friend and says something like, "Hey sweetie, how's it going?" and then just full on kisses my friend. My friend almost punched the guy, but luckily realized he was being mistaken for his twin. He explained that he was not in fact his twin, and the guy literally looked like he was going to die from embarrassment at this realization. My friend and I assured him it was okay, and that it was an honest mistake. We all laughed about it after. When my friend got home, he found his brother, and, after taking him to a quiet, secluded room, cause he wasn't sure if anyone else knew yet, he told him the story of that day, and asked him if he was gay. He confirmed it, and they ended up having a good bro moment out of it. What's even better is that this situation made them really close as brothers, whereas before, they could barely stand being in the same room with each other. TLDR, my friend got mistaken for his gay twin by his boyfriend, and that's how my friend found out his twin was gay. Not a twin, I'm 2 years older than my brother, but we used to get mistaken for each other all the time, to the point of being called by his name, greeted by and engaged in conversations with strangers who were convinced I was him, and so on. A lot of people knew me from high school, even though I homeschooled. He didn't. Probably the worst one was after he went to college on another island. My brother has a very polarizing personality, which means not every case of mistaken identity is pleasant. I went to visit my brother at his uni. I was taking classes online, but occasionally had to fly over for in-person classes, having only been there once before. This trip happened to coincide with my birthday, so I decided I would take a stroll around the campus after classes and just kind of enjoy the time to myself. I was looking at a poster hanging above a stairway near his dorm, which had an advertisement for a cake concert, which was happening the next time I'd be on island, and someone jogging behind me ran right past me, and said, "I fucking hate you," as he started jogging down the stairs. I was kind of puzzled by the exchange, since I didn't know this person, and had never really been about on campus before. I leaned over the rail and said, "Pardon me," and as he turned around and started jogging down the second flight, he looked up and said, "I said I fucking hate you," and kept going without breaking pace. Since I had no clue who this was, I figured either he was some random jogger who gets his kicks declaring his hatred for strangers on his route, or he really hated my brother, and unfortunately, I know which one is more likely. I guess it isn't so much embarrassing as it is bizarre, but it felt pretty bad to have a stranger tell me, without provocation, that he fucking hated me twice on my birthday. Not me, but my 2 best friends from my childhood. We were drinking heavily one weekend. This is post high school, sophomore year in college, in the fall, and were subsequently sitting around a campfire. The twins and I, let's call them Mike and Steve, were hammering through a bottle of Rumplemans when Mike passes out. We'd been day drinking and this was about 1 AM Sunday morning. We carried him inside and put him to bed and returned to the campfire. Another hour or so of debauchery continues and Mike's girlfriend, let's call her Kate, comes by to finish off her night. You see, she was at her sorority gathering and couldn't come out to our party until much later in the night. Well, as I said, she finally did, and she was just as messed up as the rest of us. So we are all 3 sheets to the wind, continuing the end of our night, and the next thing you know, people are turning in for the night. I put out the fire and went inside. Only there was a problem. In my bed I found Mike and his girlfriend doing the dance with no pants. I immediately kicked them out of my room and passed out, not realizing what had actually happened, until I woke up the next morning, that I'd actually mistaken Mike for Steve. Fast forward to the next morning and the inevitable shouting wakes me up. Well, apparently Kate had asked Mike if he'd used a condom last night because she'd been sick, and we talked about you needing one for the next few weeks until my cold goes away and I'm plenty finished with my antibiotics, so my BC takes over again. Mike knew what happened right then and there, and needless to say things were awkward for a while. As to be expected, Mike and Kate broke things off because they just couldn't get past it. Understandably so, Mike and Steve worked everything out after a long period of time, and the three of us are back to being best friends again. But believe me, not only was it awkward between them for a while, but it was for me too, as I was mediating my best friendship with two guys who wouldn't speak to each other, and I hung out with them separately trying to keep everything together. Not a twin, but my grandpa had an identical twin. My grandpa lived at my house for the last 5 years of his life or so, and I was a teenager at the time, about 13 to 18. His twin brother had died years earlier, but my grandpa had Alzheimer's and didn't remember his brother wasn't around anymore. Anyway, my grandpa had a problem with mirrors because he always would see his brother's face and think it was him. We had to cover the mirror in the main bathroom he used with big sheets of brown paper, otherwise he would have long conversations with himself or refuse to leave the bathroom unless his brother came with him. One time we were at Denny's and he needed to go to the bathroom, so I went with him. After he finished, he was washing his hands and he asked me to grab a paper towel and hand it to Guy, his brother's name, so he could dry his hand. I tried to play along, but my own reflection would get in the way. When I was pretending to hand the paper towel, my grandpa got pretty frustrated with my reflection that day for getting in the way of me handing a paper towel to his reflection. Meanwhile, people came in and out of the bathroom, and I had to just ignore them as I tried to figure out the situation. Eventually I handed my grandpa the paper towel directly and then said, "Look, Guy has a paper towel," and things were fine, but it was a bit awkward for a while. Just as a side note, for those who see this as a sad story, I see this as an amusing story and a cherished memory of my grandpa, who I love dearly. He was most always in a very pleasant mood even at the height of his disease, and only had occasional moments of anger or frustration because of things like this. I'm an identical twin, have been my whole life. We did pranks and whatnot, but mostly maintained our individuality. Only time I recall being embarrassed was when the two of us started working for our dad on construction. Just a gig to keep the PS2 games flowing. Anyway, there was a tucker box everyone on site would go to, and we'd hit on the ladies working there. They'd flirt back. There's no tip culture in Australia, by the way. Being salacious is just how people are. One night I'm getting my drink on at literally the only club in town. This place that would play nothing but R&B underneath the local RSL. The tucker box ladies were present, and they were in fine form. So I start catching up, hammering vodkas, and I tell my mates I'm gonna go dance with them. One of the ladies in question doesn't even pause when she sees me coming. She's onto that sheet. Bear in mind I'm not good looking or whatever. I scanned my face into NBA 2K17 and it made a generic white dude with Owen Wilson nose. But working construction, you get hectic tan and a decent physique, and that can bridge quite a few gaps. Anyway, this lady is on me in a heartbeat, and she is dancing nasty like. The woman I was actually interested in was nearby in the dancing circle, but this chick was on me. She was gorgeous and my friends were egging me on like I was a god, so I got into it. Shit is escalating hardcore. We are making out on the dance floor, off the dance floor, against a wall, and she goes, "Okay, my brother's name, let's get out of here." My heart sank a little because I'd been trading on my bro's hard work. I'm also super embarrassed because what if she thinks I deceived her? We'd never be able to go to that lunch place again. The guys on the site wouldn't like that. I'm full Larry Daviding out over here, but I own up to it anyway. Actually I'm Jibba Jojo, I told her, and she replied, "What? Who cares? You're the same." So I went home with her. Not me, but my dad is an identical twin. I have two stories. My dad worked as an apprentice for some years in his youth and became quite close with his boss. They were good friends and had met each other's family. When my dad's boss died, both my dad and uncle went to the funeral. A relative of my dad's boss started talking to my uncle, assuming him to be my dad, and called him by my dad's name. My uncle said, "No, I'm Angel Katie's uncle." Angel Katie's dad is my twin. The guy got really mad at him and started going off at him, saying that a funeral was not the place to be making stupid jokes. My dad had to actually come over to them to calm everyone down. My favorite story, however, is this one. As a 12-year-old, my dad and uncle were little sheets. They went to the same intermediate, kind of like middle school. One day my dad was being a show-off and was swinging off the balcony of a second-story classroom and recess time. A teacher saw him from a distance and yelled at him, but he got away before she had a chance to catch him. Both my uncle and dad were sent to the principal's office. However, both blamed the other and both had different friend groups backing up their alibis. The principal called in my grandmother and told her that he wanted to punish both of them because he knew one was covering for the other. Well, Granny ain't no pushover, and she told him that unless he could prove definitively which twin it was, he wouldn't be laying a finger on either. The principal was annoyed, but he let them go. My granny and uncle left the room first, but just as my dad was about to leave, the principal mumbled, "I know it was your brother that did it. I just can't prove it." My dad still loves telling that story. When I was a kid, if my uncle visited our house, he'd say, "Honey, I'm home," in my dad's voice, to try and trick us. My dad did the same with my uncle's family. At a dress-up part, they even tricked their wives successfully, but my little cousin knew who was who. Apparently, even as babies we never had trouble. Not an identical twin, but I do have a twin sister. I'm a guy. We both have names that start with B. This was about 5 years ago. She had a few hot friends in high school and they would always come around the house and hang out. If I was there, I would always joke around with them or playfully flirt with them. Nothing crazy. However, one of her friends was always a little bit more flirtatious with me than any of the others. Never thought anything of it until I received a text from her one day out of the blue. "Wanna chill tonight?" I was so taken aback I really didn't know what to do. Did my sister know her friend had asked me to hang out? Should I tell my sister? I texted her friend back, still a bit surprised but curious. "This is kind of unexpected. What would you wanna do?" She answered, "Just need to get a few things off my chest." "You going to be home at 7? I can just head over then." Me. "Yeah, that's fine. I should be home." "What brought this on so suddenly?" You know. Just a lot of feelings and she'd me. "Okay, well, just text me when you're here equals." My heart is racing at this point and I decided I'd see how things went that night and talk to my sister later. So I'm waiting for her to get there and then all of a sudden I hear her downstairs. I head down the steps to go get her and she's talking to my dad. He walks back to the living room. I say hey and ask her how she is and all that and say we can head out back to talk. She asks if everything is alright. I, a little confused, then asked what made her want to hang out tonight and why she waited so long. She gets all red and opens her phone real quick and quickly realizes what happened. She texted me instead of my sister. TLDR, tried to smash. Not so fast. Edit. The aftermath. Laughs were had. The friend knew how I used to get around. Always had a girlfriend or prospect. There was definitely some sexual tension after the event. I'm sure if I had pursued I could have smashed. I respect my sister too much to have put her through anything that could have happened. I went to college shortly after. Back when I used to bartend, I had a pair of regular customers who were twin and also Asian, born in Hong Kong, who would usually come in for double date during the week when I would be doing a solo shift. I knew them and their SOs as well as regulars, chat about games and hobbies and such, and they both had big senses of humor, so we got really well. One of the brothers came in with his respective work friends or other mates most weekends on and off, and over a few years a few good stories accrued. My manager once grilled me cause she thought I was cheating the business by double tabbing them to scam the secret regulars discount we did. I had to explain that they were twins and got her to bring up footage from their usual midweek date. One of my co-workers thought they were one person and that one person was some buck wild the game style dude who would try to pick her up by trying on different names. Another one of my co-workers had convinced himself he was really racist as he knew there were two guys but that he could also never tell them apart. This eventually cleared up when I got him to come in for training one week. They both liked really dope suits and would troll me constantly by pretending to be each other, matching their ties and jackets and both swinging in on the same Saturday. I eventually got them back by making them drinks I knew they hated and picking up super awkward conversations where they left off. I worked at a summer theater once upon a time and was stuck doing laundry while everyone else had already left to go to the standing Friday night barbecue. The season was short, too short to learn intimate details about coworkers like that they have twins. One week my twin was coming to visit and called me to inform me that she was parked at my apartment. I told her she was early. I asked if she could see a guy in a kilt at the grill. She said yes. I told her that was Cliff, to go say hi, and I would see her in 30 minutes. She had an interesting 30 minutes as she was walking to the grill. One of the scene carpenters came up, pinched her cheek, and said hi sweetie. She balked and backed several feet away. Dude looked confused, and twin also looked confused. My boss sees this happen, says hey V, that's not Bridget, that's her twin. V did not believe her and called me on my phone to try, presumably to hear it ring in front of him, so he could catch me in the lie. He was so confused when I answered and was not clearly standing in front of him. Now, if you're not a theater person, you may not realize that theater people are awfully comfortable with each other. There's little personal space. In that 30 minutes she proceeded to be bombarded with hugs, high faves, nearly an affectionate ass grab, and even got picked up in a massive bear hug by a guy in a kilt. The mistakes continued, even after I had arrived. One performer, Mickey, came up and gave her a huge hug. She reciprocated with an awkward pat on the back. I called to him. He did a triple take, said no wonder that was a little cold and distant, and profusely before wandering off point. Since this was the first real time my sister and I were in a situation where people didn't know of our mutual existence, we thought the entire situation was hilarious. Identical twin here. When I was in high school I took a course about law. It was a pretty easy elective where we spent most of the time watching Criminal Minds. Lol. Anyways, I would always skip this course all the time and my teacher was sick of it. He ended up pulling me outside the classroom to tell me if I skip one more time he will be forced to kick me out of the class. I understood and stopped skipping as I needed the credits. Fast forward a month. I tell my teacher I won't be in class next time as I have a dentist appointment. He thanks me for letting him know and I leave. After my appointment, when I return to this class the next time I have it, the teacher pulls me into the hall and lets me know that he witnessed me on the security camera footage of the school walking around the halls at the time when I said I would be at the dentist, and that he's sorry, but he needs to kick me out of the course. He happens to be in charge of the cameras as well as teachers. I was in shock as I know I was at the dentist. After a few seconds of shock I realize he must have seen my brother and I inform him that I have an identical twin. He didn't believe me at first as we both knew how close I was to being booted out of the class, and he thought I was trying anything to cover my ass. It wasn't until I went back into the class to ask everyone there to confirm I actually had a twin. We all had a good laugh. Lol. TLDR. Twin brother was seen out of class when I was supposed to be at the dentist. Almost got me kicked out of the class. This thread's pretty much done, but I'll still post because there's not a ton of I'm a twin stories. There's been a bunch. Me and my brother were uncanny lookalikes until he met his wife, who fully supported his beard flavored dreams and his wonderful, yet extremely fatty, cooking. So some stories. At the time, when we were 19 I was having a fling with a 30-year-old woman, and my brother was having one with her best friend, who was 28. I was downstairs in the kitchen grabbing booze, bent over looking for the vodka. She assumed I was my brother, who was in the living room, watching someone play Skyrim, and grabbed Mars as hard as she could. I knew the woman I was seeing wasn't home, and started laughing, which confused her. My brother came up behind her and scared her, and she was super embarrassed. I was at her best by grabbing a router for my folks when one of my brother's classmates from tech school came up and gave me a hug. He was all oh my god. Walter, how have you been? How was as I met this guy at his graduation, so I knew his name and replied he's good. Just got back and is living in Val. Nice to see you too, Nick. The look on his face was awesome. He realized he just hugged a stranger. In high school, one of my brother's exes would glare at me in the hallway as I walked by during senior year and would always make growling-esque noises as I walked by. One day she did it, and I was pretty pissed at something, and I barked at her. My brother doesn't give two shit what you think. What the fuck makes you think someone who doesn't even know you gives a damn? She dodged both of us for the rest of the year. A couple of the local college kids started greeting me when I'd walk around the city where my father lived. It was super awkward for me, being fucking 16. I eventually got weirded out by some frat dudes asking about beer money that I confronted my brother. He walked into their frat party, no one even questioned him, grabbed a full keg that he told everyone was empty and was going to the store for a refill. He then walked down the street, opened the keg, and threw it into the river, then proceeded to go home and act like nothing happened. There's some more, but my brother's crazy days are gone now, luckily. So my best friend is a twin, and he got into these situations all the time, but the worst was when they went to the same summer camp as teenagers. The twin I'm friends with is the older one, and he's super social, nice, and outgoing, but his brother doesn't really like to branch out and has an almost opposite personality. They end up being separated into different cabins, and the younger twin starts freaking out because he's not in the same cabin as his brother. The older brother tries to include his little brother in the group activities, but after a week, everyone in each cabin is pretty good friends with one another except for the younger brother. There's this volleyball game they do every year at this camp called AB, where the A cabin plays a match against B cabin for this stupid trophy. So my friend is in A cabin, and he's a bit more athletic than his twin brother is. He feels bad for his little brother's status as a social outcast and decides that he'll secretly switch places with him and play on the B team. So the older brother pretends to be his little brother and actually starts doing really well. The other kids in B cabin are finally starting to like the little brother because he's pretty much the only reason that the B team was scoring any points. My friend notices that the real younger brother never even showed up to the game, which was pretty typical gym skipping behavior of him. So when the B team finally wins, they all clamor around my friend and try to lift him up in the air to celebrate. They're not strong enough to keep him there for long, but it was overall a good sign. So they half carry / half wrestle the older brother back with them to B cabin to celebrate their unexpected victory. When they opened the door to the cabin, still cheering and holding their stupid trophy, they all stop in their tracks. They're in B cabin. WSS the younger twin, Alex, rubbing one out. He stutters and feels bad for his older brother because everyone thinks that the older brother skipped the game to go master bait in a different cabin. The embarrassed younger brother tries to explain that no, he's not Daniel, he's just weird little Alex in his appropriate cabin. But no one believes that the master beta was telling the truth. Now everyone thinks that my friend Daniel got caught rubbing one out and then said he was his twin, Alex. Luckily, the secret stayed within the confines of the camp, and no large internet site ever found out about it. Obligatory, not identical, but I have a sister a year younger who apparently looks so like me that we have been mistaken for each other on several occasions. My sister once worked in a restaurant with a friend of mine. I went to visit my friend one time, and a manager stopped me at the door and said, "Oh, there you are you looking for next week's hours? I don't really have them done yet, but come to the office and I'll see what I can do. I actually wanted to talk to you about a few shift changes." He talked fast and talked a lot. Meanwhile I'm standing there, going red in the face, trying to splutter, but I'm not. I can't. Eventually I got it out that no, I'm not X, I'm her sister, but he just laughed and patted me on the shoulder as if to say yeah, good one, and continued talking at me. Eventually my friend came over and pointed out I was not who he thought. But not before he jotted down my hours for the coming week and pressed the paper into my hand. He thought the whole thing was hilarious and couldn't accept that we looked so alike. Man, I was an extremely unassertive teenager. Bonus story, my so and his brother look quite alike, not as much as me and my C's, but people have mistaken them / confused names. He and I went to a local food place recently, and the guy behind the counter gave him a wink and said, "Oh, hungry again are we?" He explained, "Oh no, that must have been my brother," but the guy wouldn't believe him, just said yeah, sure. I later realized that the wink was because my so's brother has a very beautiful wife who must have been with him at the time, and this guy then sees who he thinks is the same guy a few hours later with a different, not beautiful, woman. He must have thought I was the wife and she was the hot mistress. While I'm not a twin, my younger sister and I have been constantly mistaken as such from a very young age, since apparently we look very much alike. I don't see it, but whatever. I was at a local watering hole one night, having a few, and started chatting with the good looking guy on the stool near me, aiming to at least get his number. Suddenly, I heard my sister's name called quite loudly, and naturally turned to see what was going on, as another guy I've never seen before ambles over and says, "Remember me? We went to high school together." In a very carrying volume point, I politely tell him he had me mistaken for my sister, who went to a different high school than I did. However, since he had never previously met me, and my sister and I never really talked about each other in our social circles, he was very insistent that I must be my sister, and that I was trying to play him off. Eventually, he left me alone, but the good-looking guy apparently thought I was trying to run some game, and was cool towards me for the rest of the time he was there. Since I couldn't prove I was who I said I was, I only found out after I pulled out my wallet to try to show him my ID that I had forgotten to replace it after I put it in a clutch the previous evening, and since I was such a regular face at the bar, no one had bothered to check for my ID that night. See, I did not get a number. It's not all bad, though. I've played the twin card a few times to my benefit. The most memorable was when my family went on a cruise and docked in Nassau for the evening. My sister had gone out bar hopping with her boyfriend and our other sister. Since we had no way to contact each other at the time, I went from bar to bar, asking each bouncer if they had seen my twin that evening. I hit the jackpot 3 or 4 places in when I was asked if she was accompanied by a physical description of the boyfriend and the other sister. I agreed and the bouncer let me through. When I was in high school there we had half a pair of identical twins in our grade, while the other went to a different school to avoid confusion. This was due to the schools being private Catholic schools, so we were outside of typical catchment. Now, my high school girlfriend had a crush on our twin, and I always understood why, because he was a handsome person, and he was very friendly and outgoing. Before I started dating her she would daydream about him all the time. Eventually we learned the primary reason she was interested in him was because at the very first school dance both twins were there, and the brother at the other school was friendly with her and asked her to dance. Point with the context for her crush out of the way, one thing was abundantly clear to most of our grade, with only a few stragglers. The twins were similar in as many was as physically possible and very similar in terms of personality as well, but they were the exact opposite in one key way. The twin who went to our school was as gay as the day is long, and his brother was heterosexual. Our twin didn't exactly advertise his preferences, but anyone who wasn't wearing rose-colored glasses typically figured it out pretty quickly. So one day my future high school girlfriend decides to ask our twin to the dance, and you can imagine the ruckus that sprang up around her. All of her friends tried to talk her out of it, and eventually it fell on me to stop her as everyone in the grade knew I was hopelessly infatuated with her. She's walking up to him to ask him to the dance when I get shoved out of the gaggle of her friends in the library and basically forced to ask a girl out in front of her impossible crush. All of our mutual friends, and to make matters even more cringe-inducing, our twin somehow managed to turn the situation into a double date with me and her, even though I'm pretty sure she was about to turn me down, and him and his boyfriend. So not only was I present for the most nonchalant public outing that I've ever heard of, and the public embarrassment associated with the situation, and shortly thereafter I had to deal with her dissolving into a bawling mess over said embarrassment, and learning she was one of maybe 5 people in the entire grade, teachers included, who didn't know her crush was into dudes. My twin brother and I are aircraft mechanics in the Air Force. I went TDY, temporary duty, to his base for an exercise centered on pilot training / war games. My squadron had sent a few of us to his base a few days early to prep for the arrival of our aircraft. Our jets were due in on a Saturday, and after much pleading and a case of beer, He reluctantly agreed to help recover my squadron's aircraft. The idea was we were going to mess with the pilot once he exited the aircraft. The plan, he would jump into the engine intake and eye the engine exhaust and just mess with the pilot as much as possible. It went as follows. My twin helped the pilot out of the cockpit and immediately jumped into the engine intake and eyed the exhaust. As the pilot was accomplishing his aircraft walk around post-flight, I start yelling at him like there's no tomorrow. "Sir, what did you do? What happened to the engine? How did you get from Langley to here on one engine?" As this is happening, other pilots and maintainers are starting to gather round to see what the commotion is about. "Did you not have any warnings come on? Any caution lights?" As this is happening, you can see the color drain from his face, like he had been caught with his hand in the cookie jar. "What did you do? There's a problem here. There's supposed to be a motor somewhere in here. I went the intake and now I'm in the exhaust. Where's the motor? What did you do?" "I went in with hair. Twin brother had a full head of hair. I don't have any hair now. I recently just shaved my head." The pilot starts to stutter and stammer, trying to formulate a coherent sentence, albeit unsuccessfully. After letting him struggle for a few seconds, I just hop out of the exhaust. "Just kidding. Everything's fine." Of course he was unable to comprehend what had happened until my twin brother jumped down from the intake. As soon as he saw there was two of us and realized that he had just been punked in such a manner in front of fellow pilots and maintainers, I've never seen anyone storm off so fast, all while the growing crowd was laughing uncontrollably. Not a twin, but met twins at my local gym. When I started, I slowly got to know a few people besides the two friends I joined this gym with. Little head nod, occasional fist bump, "Hey man," and a little conversation once a while. One guy stood out and knew the guys around since he worked there part-time. He introduced me to a friendly bunch, so to speak. 4 more guys. One of them a smiling, dark hair, tall, aesthetic and seemingly chill dude. "We call him Jack." Said group liked each other and organized a few early Sunday training sessions so we could learn from one another. Next thing you know, it's a Tuesday, leg day. After proper warm up and a little small talk, Jack and I start filling up the bar and going 90% on squats. During his reps I'm using my time to recover, staring a little dull into nothing while keeping my eye on my newly acquired friend. Being a minute into recover mode, I get a decent firm tap on the shoulder, and being on the receiving end, you know this gotta be a buddy point. It's Jack point. I give him a firm high five and some mixture of a fist into his waving hand. Him being all enthusiastic and all over the place, I started wondering, how the hell could he be so fresh, and am I spent after this 4th set? I look into the squat rack. It's Jack point. I need to see this again point. I checked again, while I got a handshake, friendly smile and hi, my name is Alex. A couple stories, not an identical twin by the way. My first is my brother, M, and myself, F, are 15 months apart. My mom always called us Irish twins. We were constantly asked growing up if we were twins by strangers. In HS, for Gender Bender Day during Spirit Week. This was early 2000. I'm not sure they still have this day in schools with all the PC happenings. I decided to not only dress as a boy, but to go as my brother. I hadn't quite hit puberty yet, and with baggy clothes and shoes with a slight lift I looked eerily similar if you weren't paying attention. It was a close enough match that I fooled my mother for about 30 seconds, and the next day at school, he was a grade above me, and I didn't inform him of my plan. All of his friends mistook me for him briefly and continued to call me his name the rest of the day. In retaliation he put on a skirt and let someone put makeup on him, but I'm pretty sure that only added to his embarrassment, as without long hair he looked nothing like me. My second involves my mom. She is a fraternal twin. My aunt does not like people knowing her age, so during one family holiday party when someone asked my aunt how old she was, and she said I don't know, I happily supplied the answer by saying you're the same age as my mom, 44. Because you are twins. My aunt did not find my 4-year-old smarts adorable. I also routinely got my mom and aunt confused at times. They don't look similar, but to a kid who hasn't been diagnosed with glasses yet and desperately needed them, it was close enough to cause confusion from across the room. My wife's best friend hates his twin brother. One day she was hanging out with her best friend and she noticed him watching a mother with 2 young twin children. "Ah, you thinking of telling her not to dress them alike?" she asked him. "I'm thinking of telling her to kill one," he replied. The most embarrassing story with him I ever witnessed had an amusing ending point. When they grew up, they wound up still living a few blocks from each other. My wife's friend, because again he hated his brother and was also a dick, would often go to the local video store pretending to be his brother and using his account. But his brother eventually caught on point. While we were visiting my wife's friend, we went to rent a video. When we checked out, he gave his brother's name for the account, and then the clerk asked, "Password?" My wife's friend asked, "Did I put a password on the account?" The clerk said, "Yes you did." My wife's friend asked, "Is it X?" The clerk said, "Yes it is." So we went back to his house to enjoy the movie. I have always been tickled that his brother was canny enough to password protect his account because he knew his brother was using it, but stupid enough to use a password his brother could guess. I'm an identical twin. To making things more complicated, there's another set of twins in our town that I share the exact same first and last name with and also have similar appearance. The problem came when I went to the orthodontist for a braces checkup. The lady asked my name and even said, "Oh, you're one of the twins," which I laughed as it's a common happening as an monozygotic human. So they sat me in my seat and the orthodontist came by to check out my progress. As soon as he looked at my mouth his eyes opened and he was completely awestruck by the apparent overnight progress my teeth had made. Said in all his years he's never seen someone's teeth and bite resolve in such a short amount of time, and that I was completely ready to have them removed, which to me was months ahead of schedule. Hooray. He left me and started making comments to everyone until an assistant decided to look into it. Thankfully they double checked the photograph tied to his account and realized the error. Still had braces for months after, and a great decreases in confidence that my orthodontist knew what was going on, haha, but still made for a fun afternoon. Maybe not a typical twin story, but I definitely felt the small world phenomenon strong. Me and my actual twin are almost copies, by the way. I can't even tell who is who in pictures pre-12 years old. We were also pronounced fraternal at birth and got genetic testing at 20 years old for a birthday present to finally find out that we were indeed identical. Everything changed, haha. Not a twin, but I've been waiting to tell this story for a while now. When I was in 6th grade we had a substitute teacher come into class one day and my friend and I decided to play a prank on her. All of our desks had our names printed on the front, I guess, so our teacher could easily remember our names. When the sub came in my friend and I switched desks so that she would think we were the other person. What started as an innocent prank became a high stakes operation of trying not to get caught in this gag all day. The whole class played along all day, and just as the end of the day came near it seemed like we had succeeded. Then I made a rookie mistake. As I was leaving to go home I had forgotten my lunch bag in the classroom, and being the good substitute teacher that she was, she decided to run on the bus she saw me get on and yell as Jessica, my friend's name, on this bus. She forgot her lunch bag. No one on this bus was in my class, and so not a single person knew that we had been playing this prank on her. My bus driver said there is no one on the bus named Jessica just as I was coming up to the front to get it. I sheepishly say that's me, grab the lunch bag, and return to my seat, all the while trying not to make eye contact with the bus driver or the teacher. When my actual teacher came back the next day we got a firm talking to about respecting substitutes and whatnot, but we never really got in trouble for it. My twin and I had a ritual back in high school in which every April 1st, him and I would switch one of our classes. We had always played our tactics smart and paid attention to all our differences to the smallest detail. We would comb our hair the opposite way, we parted our hair differently, and would be one way people could tell us apart. We would switch driver's licenses and IDs, as well as wear each other's cologne. We would even go as far as to study the content of each other's class, so that we would appear to actually be the right twin. By our senior year the staff became quite familiar with our scheme and knew to look out and try to crack down on us so that we would not have another victorious year. What the staff didn't know was that we had been in a terrible rollover accident during spring break in which resulted my twin to be in a medically induced coma well past April 1st. I came out fine thanks to a seatbelt. Anyway, I would have not been able to pull the scheme in anyway, cause then an absence would result on my endpoint. So here comes the big day and all my teachers end up figuring out that I'm really the right twin and that my other one is sick. All but one of my teachers thought that we were pulling the scheme better than ever. My coach was convinced that I was the other and seemed to not take the joke lightly. I had to tell him there was no joke this year, but he didn't stop and told me I can be expelled for ditching and that what I was doing was immoral. I got kinda upset by his tone, so I just simply replied that my twin had died in an accident and that he was never coming back. His face was astonished. I felt bad, so I told him April Fools. It didn't turn out as funny as I expected. Throwaway because this would be bad if pinned to me. My sister and I are pretty much indistinguishable physically, and our voices sound very alike. I don't know if I'd consider it embarrassing exactly, and this was a few years ago, but while we were in college I spent about a week straight sleeping with her boyfriend while she was away on a trip over winter break because he thought I was her. She had taken a trip with friends over the break that she didn't tell him about because she wanted a girl time sort of thing. She knew I was staying at our apartment and figured I'd cover for her if he called. She left her phone with me and everything, just so I could be her if necessary. I figured that meant playing it off on the phone and that was about it. Well, her boyfriend went to a different college about 3 hours away and he came to visit as a surprise literally an hour or so after she had left. I thought he'd be there a day and head back. Well, the first night I had a little too much to drink and things happened. So I ran with it, and he stayed a lot longer than I expected. He called me her name and everything, never suspected a thing. I had flipped the story and told him I, not his girlfriend, was on the trip. I had been single a while, and he was really fun. I knew it was bad, but I couldn't believe he didn't pick up on it, so I didn't stop. He finally went back the day before she was scheduled home, and I filled her in that he came to visit when she got back. I didn't go into detail, and she never really asked, but I did say he had no idea it was me. She didn't fess up to him that she went on a trip, so he thinks it was her to this day. I suspect both of them probably know what happened, but I'm not entirely sure. They just got married this year and I get along fine with her husband, so I've never fessed up. I'm a twin, and although we've never really had anything embarrassing for us, we used to work in the same shop, and whilst my brother would serve a customer and go and grab their products, I would work out with the products for my own customer. I walk straight by his customer and carry on with my work. A few seconds go by as brother's customer sits in, or that he thinks that he has gone and served another customer. Then he pipes up all semi-aggressive, "Oh, I mate, you were just serving me, what's going on?" "Wait for it," I said, and carried on with my business. Customer sits there grumbling. Few moments later my brother walks out with grumpy guy's products and he clicks. Never seen anyone feel such a tea. What? He apologized profusely, so it's all good. Way I see it is, what's the odds of identical twins working in the same company and same store? Whilst writing that, it reminded me of when I first went into the store. My brother worked there first. We worked in a shopping center, so there was a weekly fire alarm check run by the facilities manager, known to be a bit of a tool. First time he comes round I'm working, but my brother wasn't, so I say I didn't know how to run the test, pass him on to the manager, who sorts it whilst he gives me a foul look. Second week comes round and I say I still haven't been shown yet, and I'll grab the manager for him again. No, not this time. He proceeded to have a pop about he's seen me here for months and he's shown me how to do the test himself, so stop giving him shit. I told him to come back next week and I'll show him why. Me and bro were working. Sure enough, he bowls in and sees me. This time I grabbed my brother. As he walked out, faculty's guy jaw drops. Couldn't even speak. Quietly apologizes and runs off with tail between his legs. Never had any trouble after that. I was returning equipment at my college. I was hungover, had overdue homework to get to, and wanted to get pho. I'm walking back to the elevator and a really cute girl grinds her fingernails along my shoulder and tells me to hold the elevator while she returns equipment too. Okay, I guess. It's just us two in the elevator. I don't feel like making a move or chatting as at the moment I don't care much, but she's looking at me as if waiting for a response. Then asks, "Do you remember me?" "Sorry, I sure don't. I have a twin brother though, so maybe you're mixing us up." I knew I hadn't hooked up because I never left my apartment last night. She looks hurt, but I don't know what else to say, and my brain is out for the day. Elevator opens and I leave. Turns out this was a girl my twin had just started dating, and he hadn't yet told me about her. After our elevator encounter she went to administration and asked if there were any red-headed twins in the department. The administrator, who has mixed me and my brother up dozens of times and our being twins has caused him a lot of paperwork, tells her that no, there aren't any twins in this school. Fucking great point. She never believed him that he had a twin and they quickly dissolved after that. I bought him a drink to apologize. My identical twin sister and I go to different universities in the same city. Her boyfriend is in a frat, and I sometimes make appearances at parties. One night I get to a big party at the frat house. I only know a few people, so I walk around chatting. I get to talking with a guy from a different nearby school. He's flirting, and I'm fine with it. A minute or so later a staggering drunk girl who I had never met runs up to me, shoves me as hard as she can away from the guy, and starts screaming at him. Here were the facts that I was missing. The guy I was talking to went to a different school, and the party was only open to guys in the frat. The girl, let's call her Catherine, was a frat mom type who likes to be in charge. Catherine assumed I was my sister, readily flirting with a guy who wasn't her boyfriend. Catherine is faking crazy when drunk. After getting violently shoved across the room, I'm super faking confused. Catherine is screaming at this guy to get out. Everyone is staring. Eventually someone in the frat clarifies who I'm to Catherine and politely asks the guy to leave while simultaneously apologizes for the random drunk girl attacking us. TLDR, a drunk girl I never met attacked me at a party, thinking I was my sister, over dumb frat rules. Not me but my cousins. So these guys are identical twins, about 2 years younger than me, brothers I never had kind of thing. So they were at UVM in Burlington together, also lived together, but weren't always doing everything with each other. One night the wilder one, I'll call him E, was out at a bar in Burlington and extremely drunk. He ended up getting asked to leave by one of the bouncers. He went on to the next bar with some friends and thought nothing of it. Fast forward 45 minutes, it's now like 10. This bar, the one he got asked to leave, is rockin' and packed. And who decides to go there with some friends? His twin brother, I'll call him A here. A gets in with his friends, orders his beer and starts enjoying the band. He is promptly approached by a furious bouncer who tells him get the fuck out to here and starts screaming at him for thinking he could just waltz back in after the sheet he pulled earlier. After about 10 seconds A realizes what's happening and starts trying to explain about his twin brother. As you might imagine, the bouncer was having none of that and promptly kicked him out, orphaning a poor defenseless beer that had barely been drunk. He also confiscates his ID, presumably to prevent him from trying to come back in a third time. Night goes on, people drink, etc. Next day, A has to get his ID back from the bar. He also wants to be vindicated. So he drags his hungover ass out of bed and back to the bar with him in the early afternoon. Who should happen to be checking IDs at the door? The bouncer from the previous night, who promptly goes white, stares in disbelief, says you gotta be faking kidding me. Then goes and retrieves A's ID without either A or E having to say a word. Not sure if this counts, but me, my twin and 2 other guys, we'll call them Chad and Billy, shared a room in a hostel for a school trip. One night Billy knocks on the door wearing few clothes and rushes in at a late hour. He looks really embarrassed and tells us all in confidence that he did the deed with someone in another room. We were beginning 6th form, 16 to 17 years old, so obviously he deserved a high five. The next morning me and my twin go and hang out with our friends, Billy and Chad not present. Literally, the first thing my twin says, you never guess what happened last night. Gossiping then ensues, but I stayed silent, because I'm not a douche. Point of course, news like this spreads, and by default the action of one twin is generalized to both. When the girl that got with Billy, we'll call her Margaret, heard about this rumor, she and her friends had confronted me. I really hate confrontation, and it was kind of scary to have a circle of girls forming around me, so I walked away. I told them I didn't say anything, but nobody believed me. It's not like my friends could back me up, they were the tea. What's that drop me in it? What annoys me most is that they didn't even ask my twin. So when Margaret made little remarks about how talkative we were, I knew exactly what she was referring to, but my twin never understood. Over time, his ignorance kind of made him look like the innocent one, which makes me look like the asshole. She and my twin got on well, but I was hated during my 2 years of that sixth form. I was so embarrassed, and I did nothing wrong. Sometimes it sucks to be a twin. Not a twin, but very close in appearance, before I got fat, and only 2 years apart. I had a buddy who started dating this chick who had an instant distaste for me. I chalked it up to maybe I got drunk and said something offensive, or maybe my buddy had attributed some of his own misdeeds, and there were plenty, to me. I'm a good friend, so I took the hit and shut my mouth. A month later we are all out drinking, when I strike up a conversation with his girlfriend and find out that she's from my hometown in another state. Then it hit me. She must have thought I was my brother who ran all over her private school knocking boots. I had messed around with a few chicks from that school, but none of them would have had anything bad to say about me, and I'm positive I didn't mess with her. I never tried to recover whatever her perception was, because I just didn't care enough, and I thought it was funny. None of this mattered anyway, because my buddy pretty much cut off his nuts and handed them to her. She stopped letting him hang out with me or any of his friends. They moved back to our hometown a year later. He legally took her surname as his middle name, and he's a weirdo hardline Republican type dude now. He damn sure didn't start that way. TLDR, chick thought I was my brother. Made her boyfriend break up with all his friends cause he's whipped. Not a twin, but I have a pretty cringy story. I was at a club and desperate for some female attention. I'm a dude. I'd been off a breakup and needed something. So I spot this group of girls and decide to pounce. My coworker was super into pickup artist sheet. One of the tips he told me was, you have to disarm the girlfriends of the target girl, so you have a chance with target girl. Her friends will judge her for hooking up with you. But if you come off as charming and fun, they'll let it slide. Sounds great in theory, right? Well, seems like you need game for it to work. I use one of the tactics I've learned. One of them is to ask a girl what shampoo she uses. When she looks at another girl, you can tell they are best friends. She's looking at her friend for help, even though she probably knows the answer. I know what you're thinking. No shit, Nostradamus. Really? My answer is, my coworker is an idiot, and so am I. So I say, that's your best friend, right? Because you looked at her. That's how I know. They look at each other like, this guy's a faking idiot. Sober me didn't even realize that they were twin sisters. Identical. TLDR. Didn't get any as, but I sure felt like one. A bit late to the party perhaps, and not a twin myself. My story does however involve a pair of twins I went to college with a couple of years back. These bastards were the ultimate winners of the genetic lottery. They were highly intelligent and looked like Brad Pitt's younger clones. Thus they attracted a lot of attention from the opposite sex, in particular from one of my classmates who were the ultimate Brad Pitt fangirl. The event in question takes place in a fully crowded lunchroom, with 50 or so students eating up their pre-made lunches to the sound of a dozen overworked microwave ovens. While we were eating our not so exciting food, one of the twins walked in. This fangirl I mentioned noticed the resemblance of the twin to her movie star crush and starts talking about that to the others at the table. You could see by the look of her eyes that she was already thinking things which forever would mark this thread as NSFW. When the other twin walks in, mouth ajar like a barn door during harvest, she almost shouts, "Oh my god, there is two of them." Upon which the entire room turns the attention to the fangirl and then the twins. To break the silence, accompanied by the sound of the food being heated, I rather quietly ask if she needs a napkin to wipe her chair. She did not want a napkin and left the room for the remainder of the lunch period. TLDR. Brad Pitt looking. Twins made fangirl cry out in joy and attract unwanted attention. Fangirl did not want napkin to clean chair and fled the scene. Not a twin, but was close friends with the set in high school, and this is easily one of my favorite memories of all time. For convenience sake, let's call twin 1 Joe and twin 2 Andrew. So Joe had recently started sleeping with a hottie from school called Sam. It wasn't well known or made public, but a few of his close friends knew, including myself. Fast forward to New Year's Eve, where half of my school is at a party, and it is a shit show. The garage is being hotboxed, there are people banging in the parents' room, etc. So as the night goes on, I notice Sam walking through the door. I say hi and tell her that Joe is somewhere upstairs. About an hour goes by and I find Joe and Sam talking to each other on the couch. I see that they're busy, so I strike up a conversation with some people nearby as I wait for Joe to finish his conversation. That's when I noticed Andrew walk into the room with the most evil grin on his face. Andrew was a bit aggressive when he got drunk, so I was worried he was going to start a random fight with someone. But to my surprise, he walks right up to Joe and Sam on the couch and interrupts their conversation. Now, I couldn't hear what Andrew said to Joe, but from what I saw it was probably something like, "Hey bro, do you know what Sam smells like?" To which Joe replied with just a confused look. Andrew then proceeds to stick his pointer and middle finger under Joe's nose, and it is at this moment that Joe realizes the horrible mistake Sam has made. And so does Sam, who is witnessing this all go down right in front of her. To my surprise, Joe wasn't even mad. He actually started laughing and high-fived his brother. It was pretty messed up, but at the time, everyone was so trashed they couldn't help but laugh. Except Sam. Sam was pissed. Hi twin here. During the summer between my junior and senior year, my brother and I got jobs through our school. It was a way to help kids earn some cash and get some experience without getting stressed about finding a job on our own. Anyways, I worked in a basement of a library sorting and mailing books. My twin worked in a sandwich joint. We'd been working there for 2 weeks and got into the grove of our respected jobs. So everyone has a manager who represents the school and deals with the kids. Let me say this first. I did not like my caseworker one bit. She had the habit of talking down to students and a general beachy attitude. So she calls me in the middle of work. I pick up and say I can't talk right now, I'm busy, please call later. She says no and demands that she's more important than me meeting my quota. If I don't, I get fired. I asked what she wants. She asked if I was making eye contact with my customers and being polite to them. Now, as I stated, I work in a basement with no windows sorting books. I ask what she's talking about and figure she thinks I'm my twin. But before I can polite tell I'm the other and laugh it off with her, she proceeded to scream at me. Yes, scream at me about good customer service, doing my job properly and always making sure I was doing what I was supposed to do. Now I can deal with people screaming at me or even straight up punching me, and I'm generally a respectful and polite guy. But she called me up, think I was my brother, and tried to scold at me about my brother or my faking work ethic. I hit the faking brakes. I screamed, "Who the fuck do you think you're talking to? I don't faking work with customers or any of that shit. How about you do your job and look who the fuck you're calling?" Then I hung up. My coworkers about shit themselves. Anyways, when I get home, only my twin's there. Everyone else was on a vacation. We love being home alone, and he starts busting up and asks what I did to our poor caseworker. Apparently she called him up scared as hell and changed her tune on how she talked to me or my brother. She never called me again, only my bro. TLTR, my school rep tried to scream at me about doing my job properly when she meant to call my brother. Dated a girl who had an identical twin. These two were so identical you'd have to do a DNA test to figure out which was which. It was a senior year of high school. Their parents let them get a tattoo for their 18th birthday. They got the same tattoo in the same spot, only difference was the colors. It was some flower on their leg really close to their hip, kinda close to their crotch, but far enough away they could show people without it being weird. Fast forward a month with me and girlfriend watching a movie in their basement with her sister upstairs. Parents out of town at the time. We start getting frisky and making out. She excuses herself for a secretary, I'm assuming to go to the bathroom or something. She comes back a couple minutes later and sits down on my lap and we continue. Maybe 10 minutes later, her sister comes down with a blanket wrapped around her. We don't notice her until she sits down next to us and drops the blanket and she's completely naked. I look over and notice a tattoo on her leg is the same as my girlfriend's. Her sister gets off my lap and says to her sister, thanks for letting me borrow him. I was a little mad with her and I felt bad. Basically just cheated on her with her sister. TLDR. Dated twin. They switched places so the other could get handsy with me. Girlfriend wanted to fuck afterward. I was mad and a dumbass for not suggesting a threesome.